What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, the history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha America, welcome to our show. It's Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. Getting into the week here. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Before I get into the news here, I just got a phone call from the Honolulu Police Department. They're saying the Russians stole my car. So, Vlad, if you're listening to this broadcast, you owe me a new Honda. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get into the news here a little bit. Apparently, everybody is starting to realize that these Mueller indictments against these 13 Russian nationals who were allowed into the United States under Obama, I might add, they really are goofy. They have, first of all, it's come on out that his indictment was basically cut and pasted from an article that was posted to the Radio Free Europe website. In Ukrainian. It was translated, and that's basically the entire basis for the indictments. No proof whatsoever. And of course, what Mueller is trying to do is divert attention from the criminal abuses at the Federal Bureau of Incompetence and the Department of Injustice. And that's really all it is. It's pure political theater. And it's rather alarming to see the corporate media, even Fox News, is still out there, Russian collusion, Russian hacking, it's still there, it's real. They're hard selling this as hard as they can. And, of course, this is more of the Russia bashing, and it's very reminiscent of all the demonization that we were seeing about Iraq before that war, or Syria before that war, or Afghanistan before that war. It's more of the same, and it portends very bad tidings for the future here. And I have to be very honest, my analysis is the United States of America cannot win a war against Russia and China. Certainly in terms of the nuclear arsenals, they're almost matched. I think the United States has 100 operational nuclear missiles more than Russia, but they're both hovering around 2,000, and that really is enough to annihilate each other's countries. Now, the other part of Mueller's indictment that is kind of backfired is, first of all, saying that Americans who worked with these 13 Russian nationals did so inadvertently, that they didn't realize that they were Russian operatives, that we were all innocent. Well, that lets Donald Trump off the hook. That basically yanks the rug out of the collusion story with regards to these 13 individuals, and underscores the fact that this was all going on underneath Obama's administration, and he apparently did nothing about it. So, now, over on the House Intelligence Committee, their chairman, David Nunes, was doing an interview with Cheryl Atkinson, and basically came on out and said the Department of Justice and the FBI are not above the law. We're going to put them on trial if they committed abuse before the secret court, the FISA court, which they did. They sought a warrant based on lies, inaccurate information. Now, I would like for Nunes to be correct here, but as one of the callers to the show yesterday pointed out, we have seen over the last several years, high-level people are clearly guilty of major crimes, but nothing ever seems to happen to them. Meanwhile, Howard Dean is out there saying that Nunes belongs in prison for exposing Obama. And yes, Obama did all these bad things, but you're not supposed to talk about it because, after all, he's the president, and you don't expose the president for wrongdoing. Well, tell that to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, because it is supposed to be the job of the media to expose wrongdoing by politicians. And, of course, we here in the independent media have taken over that job, now that the corporate media is totally compromised. Now, Mueller has now brought charges against a lawyer for lying about conversations with an ex-Trump aide, Rick Gates. And Mueller is saying cybersecurity will be the number one future threat to the country, but for the time being, counterterrorism and stopping terrorist attacks is more important. Well, it's very easy to stop the terrorist attacks. Just stop signing the checks to the actors, and it will all go away. But they're really pushing this cybersecurity issue and this laughable idea that a hacking attack is as serious a threat to the United States as, for example, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and justifies a military response. And so we're looking at this very real possibility that the U.S. government is just going to declare by imperial edict that Russia hacked the American computer systems, Saddam has nuclear bombs, Assad has sarin gas, and just haul off and attack Russia, which would be a big mistake. But that seems to be the direction they're going. You can hear the war drums just banging away out there. It's very frightening, especially for those of us living right above a first strike nuclear target here. Now, apparently, Robert Mueller is now zeroing in on Jared Kushner and is extending his investigation beyond Kushner's contacts with Russia, and now includes his efforts to secure financing for his company from foreign investors during the presidential transition. I don't think there's anything illegal about any of that. It's just more attempts to smear Kushner. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of Jared Kushner. He's one of the voices in the White House that is arguing for more war and more intervention. But let's be fair and honest. Nothing that Mueller is talking about actually constitutes a crime. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Now, a federal judge has issued an updated standing order in the case of United States versus Flynn, suggesting that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team may have withheld exculpatory evidence while prosecuting former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. That, of course, is a no-no. There are rules regarding full disclosure. If you're bringing a trial against somebody, their defense lawyers must be given everything. And Judge Emmett G. Sullivan, United States District Judge for the District of Columbia, basically issued what's called the Brady Rule, which means the prosecution has to turn over any exculpatory evidence to the defendant's lawyers. Now, the latest word is that Flynn is going to withdraw his guilty plea and ask for a regular on trial here. All right, let's take a phone call. Dave in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dave, are you there?
Call in, yeah, can you hear me?
I hear
Hello?
you now. I hear you now.
Okay, yeah. I was kind of poking around on Twitter today, and I was looking at that Twitter account of that child shooter down in that school in Jonesboro.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Andrew Golden. You remember him?
I'm sorry, which...
Remember Andrew Golden?
Vaguely. There have been so many of these drug-crazed, prescription drug-crazed shooters out there lately.
Well, no, this was a while back. This was back in the 90s, I think.
Okay.
It was two shooters down in Jonesboro. One of them was a Jewish kid named Andrew Golden.
Mm-hmm.
And they locked them up until they were juveniles and then let them out when they were 21. So this guy, I think he killed 5 kids and shot 6 or 7 other kids. He's walking the street right now. He's got a Twitter account. It's AGolden33. And on the 14th, when those shootings happened down in Florida, he got a Twitter from the Iron Man guy, that Jewish guy in Hollywood. What's his name? Robert Downey Jr.
Yes.
You should check that out. It's pretty interesting, all these connections between these Jews in Hollywood and these Jewish child shooters and stuff like that. Anyway, that's the only thing I've got to say to you. Have a nice day.
All right, have a nice day. And I'm not sure if that's significant or not, but okay. Now, Russian senators, displaying once again that the Russians do understand irony and have a great sense of humor, have put together a list of 100 examples of the United States meddling in foreign nations' affairs. And basically they're saying we've counted approximately 100, about 101, 102, absolutely verified and recorded facts of American involvement in the sovereign affairs of over 60 United Nations member states since the approval of this organization's charter that bans any such involvement since 1946 until today. And one of the Russian senators, Senator Andrei Klimov, pointed out one particular example from the list, the 1973 coup d'etat in Chile that installed Augusto Pinochet as a military dictator, and as a result of which the country's parliament was dissolved and numerous human rights violations were committed. Probably could have added Iran in 1953 to that list as well. Yes, the U.S. likes to meddle in other nations' internal affairs, and that's what makes it so hypocritical for them to be screaming about as yet unproven Russian meddling in our internal affairs. But if you're going to talk about meddling in the United States' internal affairs, whatever Russia supposedly did, 13 guys and $2 million, is peanuts compared to what Israel does. And why is nobody talking about Israel's meddling in the United States' internal affairs? That's the elephant in the room right there. Between AIPAC and all the money and the media influence, the United States government dances to Israel's tune. Mike Pence is going to be the keynote speaker at the next AIPAC conference. So let's stop talking about Russia's meddling in our internal affairs, and let's put the focus where it deserves to be, on the single biggest meddler in U.S. internal affairs, and that is the nation of Israel. So, anyway, another article, this is Blacklisted News, basically pointing out Robert Mueller's 13 Russian trolls indictment is a copy and paste job from a 2015 Ukrainian Radio Free Europe post. Sort of reminds me of Tony Blair's dodgy dossier. That one was copied from a 12-year-old, hopelessly outdated student thesis paper. We caught them at it. We caught them at another lie here. Now, interestingly enough, CNN is so desperate to find anything about Russian collusion, they actually sent one of their reporters to St. Petersburg in Russia to literally go through the trash bins outside the office building that allegedly housed the troll farm to try and find some clues. And there are 2 points that come to mind. One, he didn't find anything. And two, why isn't CNN that diligent with the Uranium One case? Why aren't they that diligent with the pay-for-play corruption at the State Department? Why aren't they that diligent with the email server scandal? Why are they not that diligent and fact-finding when it comes to the Clinton Foundation? CNN is discrediting itself as any kind of a news organization. They're a ministry of propaganda. They pretty much all are. And even lately, Fox News has fallen right into line. They're out there with Russian hacking, Russian collusion, Russia's bad, we got to go get them Ruskies. All right, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Now, yesterday we were talking about how the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is mostly Democrats, have redrawn the House district maps for the state. And they gerrymandered it all to heck and back to give the Democrats a big boost in November's elections. They're still out there cheating. They're cheating every way that they can, and Trump isn't doing anything about it, except having the Department of Homeland Security fuss about the security of the electronic voting machines. They're a part of the problem, but they're not the only problem that's out there when it comes to our elections being totally rigged. And if Trump does not take decisive action to make our election systems honest and fair and verifiable, he's going to be a one-term president. Because the people who tried to steal the election from him in 2016 are going to try twice as hard in 2020. And because Trump has alienated so much of his support base by going back on so many of his campaign promises, we're not going to be there to fight for him. We put in a huge effort supporting Donald Trump during 2016. Why would we bother again? We voted in a president who promised he was going to drain the swamp, and the first thing you know is he's hiring all the alligators and water moccasins into key staff positions. Now let's talk a little bit about that Florida school shooting. There have been some rather interesting developments, and a lot of it centers on David Hogg, who sort of became the media star of having survived the shooting. And apparently a video has surfaced of him flubbing his lines. The video shows him literally rehearsing what he's going to say, coached by the camera man. Now, it turns out that David Hogg is the son of an FBI agent. In other words, his father is part of that same deep state swamp committed to try to destroy Donald Trump. And this was never mentioned in any of the TV news interviews when he was out there defending the FBI and blaming President Trump for the shooting, with that ridiculous claim that Trump made it easier for mentally ill people to buy guns, which, by the way, is more false news. And here's where it gets more interesting. David Hogg's mother is a VIP at CNN, as well as being an avowed anti-Trump activist. It's all theater. Now, yesterday we were talking about this video of a Parkland student saying that she thought it was a drill, that they had been told earlier in the day there was going to be a live shooting drill on the campus, and police were going to be firing blanks to scare everybody. YouTube has removed that video now, claiming that it's bullying. That's their excuse. But the reality is that fake terror, false flag terror, is a fact of history. It's the oldest trick in the book, going back to at least to Roman times. Create the enemies you need. And we have over at my website an article about 42 false flag attacks officially admitted to, where the governments, after the fact, have come on out and said, yes, we pulled a dirty trick on all of you and we got away with it. Aren't we clever? And for every one that they've admitted, I'm sure there are dozens that are still being kept secret. Now, David Steele, the second highest ranking civilian in the U.S. Marine Corps intelligence and a former CIA clandestine services officer, is out there saying most terrorists are false flag terrorists. They're created by our own security services. In the United States, every single terrorist incident we have has been a false flag or has been an informant pushed on by the FBI. In fact, we now have citizens taking out restraining orders against the FBI informants that are trying to incite terrorism. We've become a lunatic asylum. That's what's been going on. That's what's been going on. Whether it was Columbine or Boston Marathon bombing or Sandy Hook and now this shooting down in Florida. They're created by our government to scare us into surrendering our weapons, to disarming ourselves, to give up our Second Amendment rights. And this was all predicted back in 1991 in the book Behold a Pale Horse, which said the government will use school shootings, killing children for maximum shock value to get Americans to give up their guns. That's what's going on right now in our midst. Now, turning on over to the war zones, Syrian fighters have entered Afrin. Turkey has retaliated with bombardment, and apparently the specter of a Syrian-Turkish war has sent the Turkish lira and stocks tumbling. And by the way, our stock market isn't doing all that well either today. So basically, the Syrian army is now assisting the U.S.-supported Kurds to fend off a Turkish invasion. This is a very confusing war over there. Now, Turkey is continuing to threaten to strike Syrian army. Well, they've already done that. It's going to get bloody over there. I mean, we've got these horrible flashpoints all over the world where World War III can break out. They'll probably all go more or less at the same time. That's what happened in World War II. A lot of little skirmishes, Manchuria, and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden, everything blew up, and everybody said, it's on, game on, party's on. That's where we are right now. We're going to take a break for commercials here. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Appropriate bump music here. We're talking about Israel, and apparently, according to this article that came out of Blacklisted News, Israel is directly arming at least 7 Syrian rebel groups. Not really a surprise. We keep seeing all these photos and videos where the Syrian army will clean out some of these terrorist command bunkers, whatever, and they'll find all these U.S. and Israeli weapons all over the place. So, all kinds of proxy wars. Kind of hard to know who is supposed to be fighting who in Syria without a scorecard. You know what? We got to give them uniforms. Not the military camouflage, but like the NFL. You know, like bright colors, like, you know, blue for the Israelis and red for the United States and green for the Syrian army, and give them nice helmets to go with it. And we could actually sell the TV rights on that. Probably be a lot more popular than the regular NFL at this point in their decline here. Now, NATO is getting ready to set up what they're calling a military Schengen. And what that means is they want open borders all over Europe and the Mideast for military hardware to simply get waved on through. Because right now, there's a lot of paperwork. When you want to drive a bunch of tanks from one country into the next, the country where they're going usually has a lot of procedures, like, why are you bringing these in here? And NATO is trying to basically do away with that. And the reason is obvious. They want to be able to move resources very, very quickly in response to what is probably going to be a running ground war. So let's see. We have the Syria, Middle East flashpoint. We have Russia and Ukraine, which looks like that's heating up as well. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. And of course, we're back to the tough talk about North Korea. Now, Romania has just ordered $1 billion of U.S. HIMARS missile launches. And it's called the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. I think it's sort of a follow-on to the MLRS. But Romania has ordered $1 billion worth of these things. Everybody's getting ready for the war. They all know it's coming. They're making their preparations. And if you're smart, you're going to be making your preparations too. It's going to hit everybody. Go back and look at the history of World War II. Massive shortages all over the place. Rationing. It was a very tough time because the available best food went to the military forces. In fact, probably a lot of you don't realize that margarine was actually created as a wartime food because the soldiers in Europe needed the real butter because they needed the fat to stay warm. So somebody came up with this concoction of this white stuff that was kind of butter-ish. And it originally came in a plastic bag with a little food coloring capsule. It was red. I'm actually old enough where I actually saw one of these when I was a kid. And you basically, through the plastic bag, you'd break that little capsule of food coloring and you'd mash it all up until it turned yellow. And that's where it came. Once the war was over, they kept trying to sell margarine. It's healthier for you than butter and it's full of all these good things. And you find out later on, no, it wasn't. Spam, which is very popular here in Hawaii, in fact, it's almost part of the culture, was also a wartime food. It was basically taking up all the parts of pigs and cattle that couldn't be packaged any other way, just grinding it up very fine so it was edible, and put in a can with gelatin as a preservative. And during World War II, the Hawaiians got to know about Spam from the U.S. forces, and they just took a real liking to it as well. Interestingly enough, that gelatin preservative later went on to be flavored and colored and sold as Jell-O. So that's another wartime food gone commercial here. Now, as you know, over in Munich, they recently had a conference that was supposed to be about settling all of the hostilities down and trying to calm everything down. And it basically descended into gratuitous Russia bashing and warmongering. And basically they concluded, for the first time in decades, we are facing the threat of nuclear conflict. And yes, we really are. And I am willing to predict when the U.S. gets into a war with Russia and China, when they reach that day where they realize they cannot win it conventionally, they're going to start turning those keys in those silos or those submarines. And that's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. The U.S. has also issued a warning to Brussels not to threaten NATO with the EU army. Now, as you know, Brussels is talking about a grand army of the Republic. In other words, the member states of the EU will no longer have their own militaries. They're all going to be brought together under the control of Brussels. What could possibly go wrong with that? NATO apparently is concerned that they would actually be a threat to NATO's military supremacy in Europe. And so the U.S. is out there saying that if you're going to have an EU army, it has to be brought in underneath the control of NATO. So the players are getting lined up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Canada, specifically the Colt Firearms Canada division, if you will, has apparently going to sign a contract for the supply of 100,000 new assault rifles for the Ukrainian army. See, we law-abiding citizens who don't really intend to shoot anybody with assault rifles are not allowed to have them, but it's okay. We're going to give them to this army who are going to go out and kill a whole bunch of people with them. And we're seeing a lot of activity in Ukraine. Apparently, there are British and American and Canadian trainers that are now arriving at Ukrainian army units over toward Donbass to try and basically train them up. And so it looks like Kiev is planning a military assault on the eastern Ukrainian republics. There's even talk they're going to try and wrest Crimea back. And that's another flashpoint to start World War III. All right, let's see. We're going to take a phone call from HB from FEMA Region 4. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hey, I was just, were you talking any about the school shootings today? I got in on your show. I was listening to another show on RBN, and they were talking about it. Are you talking about that or something else right now?
Well, we talked about it a little bit already, but we talked about this Kevin Hogg, who's been the darling of the media as a survivor of the shooting. And it turns out his father is an FBI agent, and his mother is a VIP over at CNN. So this guy is a plant, and there's a video of him rehearsing and flubbing his lines and being coached by the cameraman as to what he's supposed to say. And how that video got out, I don't know, but somebody did a really good thing leaking that.
Well, have we confirmed any real deaths, or is it going to be another Sandy Hook where there wasn't any deaths?
It's hard to say at this point. Right now, it's very obvious it was another staged false flag, and the fine details almost don't really matter anymore. And again, I'm getting emails from people saying, you know, wasn't it amazing that the media was there so quickly to cover all of this? They had helicopters in the air and everything. Yeah, it's got all the earmarks of being a repeat of Sandy Hook or Columbine or any of these.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Some of the talk show hosts around are talking about all the drugs that he was on, but then they don't, I don't know, they just don't connect the dots sometimes about, you know, was this a real thing or not? But anyway, I like the show. Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And, people need to talk about those drugs. And not just in the context of school shootings, but in the context of pharmaceutical corporations, for the sake of a fast buck, are literally drugging the entire nation into craziness and insanity. Because just because you have not gone out with a rifle and gunned down a bunch of people doesn't mean you're not being affected by the drugs. Increases in domestic violence, increase in road rage, increase in bar fights, poor quality thinking on the job, poor quality thinking in the government especially. You start to realize the impact these medications have had on our society is extremely negative. There's reason to think that these drugs are behind this surge in police violence against law-abiding citizens. We were talking about this security guard at a church who stopped a mass shooting all by himself, and the police showed up and shot the security guard. Does that sound like careful thinking or somebody who doesn't have any control over their impulses, which is a symptom of SSRIs? Now, interestingly enough, Germany has decided they're going to launch their own spy satellites to get their own intelligence independently from the United States. Apparently, a lot of U.S. allies are relying on U.S. surveillance satellites and processing by the National Reconnaissance Office to get information. And now they're starting to think that maybe what they're getting is being doctored, and they're not getting the real story. Remember how many fake satellite images they were using to sell the idea that Iraq was about to invade Saudi Arabia? That turned out to be fake. Reporter went to one of these private spy satellites, surveillance satellites, and got pictures of the same area, and the tanks weren't there. We know that there's a lot of fakery going on here, and so Germany has said, we're going to spend the money. It's not going to be cheap. Roughly $465 million for 2 surveillance satellites. Now, getting on over to Israel, first of all, a story that just broke as we were starting the program. The police are continuing to arrest Netanyahu's co-defendants in the corruption case. Haven't arrested him yet, but apparently one of the arrested people has made a deal to turn state's evidence and will testify against Netanyahu. And tomorrow, I am certain, we will read a story about how this poor guy's car was blown up by Palestinian terrorists. Now, apparently encouraged by Donald Trump's declaration that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, there is a growing right-wing movement to just seize Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa. Now, under international law, under UN declaration, the actual location of the Temple Mount is being controlled by a primarily Muslim religious governor's board that tries to make sure that all the religions have equal access to the site. And the Jews get the Wailing Wall, and the Muslims get the platform, which has the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Christians have pretty much the rest of it. But apparently there is a growing movement called the Temple Movement, where basically they want to just grab the whole thing for themselves and make it a Jews-only monument. And that will trigger regional war. It would be like somebody going on in and grabbing the Vatican and telling the Catholics you can't come in here anymore. They're going to be a little upset by that. It reminds me of the movie Kingdom of Heaven, which, if you have not seen it, you should. And at the very end, when Balian is about to surrender Jerusalem to Salahuddin, and he's saying, if you try and take this place by force, I'll burn it all down. Every rock, every stone, everything that drives men mad, I will destroy. And Salahuddin says, I wonder if it would not be better if you did. It was the best line in the whole movie. It's just rock. Some of it's very pretty rock, but it's just rock. And it has driven the human race of 3 religions insane for centuries. Now, the tip between Israel and Poland is continuing to climb, and Poland is apparently relying on its close association with the United States to basically stand up to Israel. Now, Israel is trying to get Poland to say, yes, we helped the Nazis with the Holocaust, and therefore we are guilty and we will give you a bunch of money. And Poland is saying there were a few Poles that, collaborated, just as like there were a few French that collaborated, and a few Jews that collaborated, and at that point Israel just got really upset and said, you're an anti-Semitic Jew hater. No Jew helped the Nazis, period, end of discussion. But in point of fact, there were Jews that collaborated. Like George Soros. There's a video of him admitting he collaborated with the Nazis to steer them to find his fellow Jews. And apparently he's completely guilt-free about it. But it is a confirmed fact. A lot of people don't realize there were actually Jewish officers in the Nazi high command. The Nazis were not obsessed with Jews in particular. They were grabbing everybody for those slave labor camps. Jews, gays, gypsies, the mentally retarded. There were a lot of people in there. The actual percentage of Jews in the slave labor camps was about 10 to 15%. And Israel's distortion for political gain to justify its stealing Palestine from the Palestinians has tried to convince the world that the camps were only for Jews and that the Nazis wanted to exterminate all the Jews. No, actually, the people in those slave labor camps were treated very well because they were valuable. They were needed to make material for the German army. And anybody who knew tailoring or crafting or shoemaking or anything, they were treated very well. The surviving records of the camp show that there were doctors and nurses. They were fed well. They had theaters inside the slave labor camps. They even had bordellos. They had swimming pools. They were treated very well because they were of value. The Red Cross had offices in all the slave labor camps, something the U.S. refuses to allow down at places like Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. When I was working in Germany, I visited one of the camps. And the curator there basically laid it all out, said, no, nobody was killed here. This was a factory. They made supplies for the German army here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How are you, Mr. Mike?
I'm doing fine.
Another story that recently broke, I think it was either Monday or yesterday, and it was about the two boys that were found on the railroad tracks in Arkansas when they came across the drug deal, and I can't remember their names at the top of my head. But a pro wrestler has come out and was talking about how he was an enforcer for a certain politician that was in Arkansas. Have you run across this story?
Yeah, we actually ran that story, and he's a former pro wrestler, and he's basically confessed to being one of the Clintons' many hired hitmen. And Larry Nichols has also done the same thing and come on out and said, yes, he was paid money by the Clintons to kill people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, I'm just wondering, is this going to blow this wide open and possibly another scandal with the whole, with Obamagate and Iranium One? I mean, this seems like to me another thing that's blowing this whole thing wide open. And I'm going to say this so-called shooting, I'm not saying anybody, did not die. Absolutely, I believe people died. But I believe that this was a distraction, possibly from this coming out.
Well, it's certainly adding fuel to the fire, but you're not going to see this on the corporate media. It's only the independent media that is covering this. We have detailed all of these crimes that these politicians have been committing throughout the years, and the official response that we get from the government and the corporate media is, we don't see it, we don't hear it, and you can't make us nya, 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 nya.
Yeah, it seems like this political class, when you get involved with the political class, it seems like this is the new nobility. I mean, and I'm so frustrated because these people, get away with murder. I mean, and here, people like me and you have problems with your car, and people jacking your car, and here you can't even get the necessary help or the insurance people, to actually, in a reasonable time, help. It's like,
well, we only got the car back from Eva Beach on Friday, and yesterday, Monday, was a holiday. We're not actually expecting to hear from the insurance company about what, if anything, we're going to get from the car if it's considered a total loss, maybe $1.50, until probably about Thursday or Friday.
Right, and I'm sorry for your loss. It's a shame that you can't even. It's a shame. I mean, it's I remember. I'm 33, but I remember when you didn't have to lock your front door. You could trust people going around, and I do blame the Clinton autocracy for things like this. And I want to say this too. My dad always tells me, there's always more good than evil, but I don't see it. I feel like we have a moral compass. We don't have a moral compass anymore. We live in a land of lawlessness. Feelings, we go by feelings and not by facts. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a shame. It's a total shame. I mean, and I wish, besides putting, passing the word of mouth through these articles and everything that you do and, other people in the alternative media do, I wish there was something major we could do besides, maybe we need to start pulling stunts. I don't know.
No.
I mean, just a thought. I mean, they're not violent, but, you know, I feel like we need to get their attention.
Kevin, we do not want to give the government an excuse for any more crackdowns. Okay? We're just going to have to grin and bear it. Clearly, this is an empire in decline. And if the economy implodes, it'll bring the government down with it, and that hopefully will be the end of all this warmongering. Or we may have to all go through a war, which the U.S. is going to lose. But all empires fall after a while, and the United States has had a good run, but it's showing all the signs of an empire in decline, whether it's ancient Rome with the degree of corruption that we have here, or the Soviet Union, which bankrupted itself, overspending on the military. The signs are all there that this country is in serious, serious trouble. And I still think waiting is the best idea. I don't want to see a civil war or revolution in this land. One may come. I hear too many people talking about it. But I'd like to caution against it. I prefer the Gandhi approach, to be very honest.
I totally agree with you. I mean, yeah, sometimes I get a little mouthy with, you know, get a little excited, but I totally agree. You know, patience is a virtue and good things happen to those who wait. I agree with you. I totally agree. Well, that's all I have for you, Mr. Mike. I hope you have a wonderful and great day, and be safe and give Miss Claire the best.
I certainly will. I certainly will do that. Thank you very much here. Okay, getting on back to the news here. As you know, Israel has just uncorked on Gaza big time, struck 18 targets, and again, with little regard to actually picking the targets carefully, they've killed some children once again. And I understand where Netanyahu is at right now, especially with one of the key suspects in the probe into his corruption becoming a state witness. Netanyahu's definitely, he's spooked. And he knows that nothing will get him out of trouble in terms of the media coverage and the public's attention span than getting into a bloody war, whether it's with Syria or Lebanon or West Bank or Gaza. And unfortunately, a lot of innocent people are going to be killed and crippled for Netanyahu to try and claim to power. But that's the way these people tend to think. It's not all that different from when Monica Lewinsky testified before Congress about the stained blue dress. And when she walked on out, there were no reporters there because while she'd been inside testifying, Bill Clinton had launched cruise missile attacks into 2 other countries. This might be a good time for you all to dig up the movie Wag the Dog because it's happening for real right now. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials here, and we'll be back with more news and more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Sarah Silverman, the comedian, is not somebody that I'm particularly fond of, but she has done something I think we can all agree with. She has tweeted her support for Ahed Tamimi. That's the Palestinian teenager who's been detained by Israel in December for slapping an Israeli soldier who had just shot a member of her family. And she's become the global symbol of the Palestinian resistance movement. And so it's all over Twitter. And when Sarah does something right, she does something right. But there's a lot of very tough war talk over in that part of the world. And I think the neighboring nations to Israel understand the risk they're all at because of Netanyahu's pending trial for corruption. That he's looking for a distraction, that he's going to just strike out in all directions to try and create enough noise where the voters won't pay attention to the corruption case. And some of these nations are already coming on back. I mean, they're responding to Netanyahu's speech the other day where he's just talking tough about we're going to do this and we're going to do that. So Lebanon has announced they're ready to confront any Israeli aggression at all costs. The Lebanese army has reaffirmed its readiness to confront Israeli aggression by any means at its disposal if the ongoing disputes and already tense relations between the neighbors escalate into an armed confrontation. Now, already there is that issue over the disputed oil fields off the coast of Lebanon. And I emphasize they're off the coast of Lebanon, but Israel has laid claim to them. And now that these gas fields are being developed and money is starting to come on in, Israel covets them, along with Netanyahu's personal motivation. But Israel hasn't always done all that well against Lebanon. They've tried to invade more than a few times, and they always get driven back, mostly by Hezbollah, which is why Israel and the United States have been trying to get rid of Hezbollah to leave Lebanon defenseless. See how the pattern keeps repeat. We'll get them to disarm, and then we invade. And then it's easy for us to invade. Now, Iran has responded to Netanyahu's threats, saying that they will level Tel Aviv if Israel launches any kind of an attack against Iran. There's no gray area in that message. It's very uncompromising, and it came from Mohsen Razai, Iran's Expediency Council Secretary. So all it's going to take is one person making a mistake, and the whole Middle East is going to go up in flames. And we will see an immense oil crisis in the economy as a result of that. Speaking of the economy, Charles Hugh Smith, who's a financial writer, and basically came on out and said, in the coming economic collapse, which at this point appears to be a given, all currencies backed by government force will fail. Fiat currencies will fail. Only currencies based on a commodity will survive. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economic news now. And the other day, in fact, just yesterday, we were talking about how Donald Trump is screaming at countries like China for dumping inexpensive steel on the American market, which means American steel companies cannot compete. And today we're finding out the U.S. Commerce Department is recommending importation curbs on steel and aluminum. And what this basically means is we're going to be cut off from inexpensive sources of these materials and required to buy more expensive products from American producers who may not be producing as high a quality product. I mean, there was a time when American steel really was the best. But all those steel mills have shut down in the Rust Belt. So we're going to be looking at startups here. Now, back in the 1950s, the United States was prosperous because the United States made the best products. And other countries were willing to spend the extra money to get those superior American products. But we don't have that any longer. Our manufacturing has declined over the last 30 years. And American products are now seen as overpriced junk, including our weapons of war. And so now the U.S. government, rather than focus on restoring quality manufacturing in this country, is embarking on a program of protectionism. And we, the people, will pay the price for it with more costly and potentially inferior products. It's not going to stop with the steel and aluminum. Now, apparently, China isn't the only place that we're having a trade war with. Apparently, the European Union is gearing up for a trade war with the U.S. And is saying they're going to fight fire with fire if Washington carries out its threat to introduce import barriers to steel and aluminum products from Europe. It's not just from China that's coming on out. Apparently, they've already slapped trade sanctions on Harley motorcycles and Jack Daniels. And trade wars have a very bad habit of becoming real wars. And especially in this charged climate, that's a short drive. What can I tell you here? Another article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Are we really seeing a housing recovery? A lot of people are talking about, oh, there's a housing recovery. Or is it really just another inflationary cycle driven by the Federal Reserve? Because everyone talks about inflation and how bad it is, and it is bad. It's like a hidden tax, because the more they inflate the money supply, the money you already have in your pocket, that you already worked for, that you've got buried in the mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation, loses real value. So it's like a hidden tax. Where does the inflation come from? From the Federal Reserve. Cranking up the printing presses or typing more zeros into the computer. You can stop inflation immediately. Just tell the Federal Reserve, you can't do this anymore. You can't create money out of thin air that doesn't have anything underneath supporting it. Economically, this country is in a huge mess. We had that caller before was talking about $23 trillion in national debt. It's actually worse than that. When you figure in the unfunded mandates, it's over $100 trillion. And they're fudging the books on the unemployment. They're fudging the books on the rate of inflation. And let's see how the stock market ended up today. It ended up, bad. Dow down 254. That's going to make people very, very nervous. We all know it's coming here. Even Walmart is in trouble right now. We keep talking about these iconic retailers who are going out of business. Yesterday we were talking about how Kentucky Fried Chicken has literally had to shut down 2/3 of its stores. Apparently the problem is with their supply chain because they hired DHL to make sure chicken was being brought to the restaurants, and apparently DHL has somehow messed up. They don't have enough trucks set aside. And apparently at some of the Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants, they're literally going out to the local supermarkets to buy chicken, which of course means they're going to be much less profitable. But for all those stores that are closed, those people are now out of work. They're not being paid while the stores are closed. So over at Walmart, they're in trouble. They've missed their earnings. And again, everybody is now going back and revising the fourth quarter numbers from last year, meaning the holiday shopping season, and they're all being revised downward. So Walmart is in serious, serious trouble. Now, apparently up in Portland, they're dealing with the problem of abandoned recreational vehicles. Now, recreational vehicles, of course, they're very expensive to buy. They're very expensive to maintain. And for those vehicles that have come from companies that are no longer in business, you can't even get the parts for them. So apparently there's just a bunch of these abandoned RVs. A lot of homeless people are living in them, which I think is a good thing. But Portland doesn't know what they're going to do with them. It's going to be very expensive. These are big, heavy vehicles, and they don't know what they're going to be able to do with them. You could send me one, actually. Little one, just a little one. Here. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the nation, the broadcast, the network. Sorry, I'm reading ahead, looking at what my next story is going to be. Up in the Bay Area, NBC did a story about conditions in the streets of downtown San Francisco. Now, Claire and I were there back when I worked on The Day After Tomorrow, and we loved the place. But apparently it has gone downhill. This NBC investigation covered more than 150 blocks, including some of the city's top tourist destinations. And they found drug needles, garbage, and feces just lining the streets. It is a huge, huge mess, and it's being compared to some of the worst slums in the world. And partly it's the declining economy and declining tax revenues, and the other part of it, of course, is the influx of illegal immigrants and refugees, and no money to improve the infrastructure. I was talking to somebody the other day about our problems with our car, and just our observation that people are driving crazy, and and for all I know, they're on antidepressants as well, and how much nicer it was when we moved here about 20 years ago. And this other person made the observation, well, 20 years ago, we only had half the people. And the roads were adequate for that. But the roads have not been improved. In fact, we've got the worst roads in the entire country, according to the National Transportation Safety Board, the Department of Transportation, rather. In fact, we hit a gigantic pothole when we were out on Saturday, and Claire, unfortunately, has re-injured her back. Now, they're trying to build this light rail system, but that's billions over budget, years behind schedule, and there's a very real possibility it may never be finished. There's a big argument right now over having the entire thing go through a forensic audit because nobody knows where a lot of this money went. And, of course, the company that's building the light rail is saying, no, you can't audit us. You'll just slow us down even more. So we may have a rail, this eyesore concrete thing, and, of course, we've lost a lane of traffic along Kamehameha Highway where it runs, and that's all torn up as well. The infrastructure has not kept up with the population growth, and that has been exacerbated by the flood of illegal immigrants into California. That's where a lot of the homelessness is coming from. Los Angeles, huge number of homeless people there. Everyone says something has to be done. What do? There are no jobs. All the money is going for war. People are just piling up in the streets or living in these abandoned recreational vehicles. The only thing, at least our local government does, is try and keep them away from the tourist areas. That's not a solution. But our infrastructure is going to collapse. It's not being maintained. And yes, Trump has come on out and acknowledged our infrastructure is in serious shape, and he's pledged a small amount of money, really a token, to try and get some things fixed. But it's nowhere near enough. The country needs a complete rebuild from top to bottom. Now, here's another area where I'm very disappointed with Donald Trump. Apparently, Trump's lawyers are protecting Obama's claim of having the power to import limitless foreign graduates for U.S. employers. And Trump's lawyers are defending Obama's claim that every administration can displace U.S. professionals by granting work permits to an unlimited number of foreign white-collar workers. And again, what are these people thinking? We have American kids who've gone to college, they've gone heavily into debt, they come on out of college, and the few jobs that are actually out there are now being held by these foreign kids. And that's not healthy. And yes, unfortunately, sadly, it's true that all these years of Common Core and declining education in this country, our college graduates just aren't up to the standards of these foreign graduates. And that's a failure, not just of Trump, not just of Obama, but every single administration going back years. They didn't want to educate, they wanted to indoctrinate. Well, how can you run an economy with people who are indoctrinated to believe certain things, to be liberal snowflakes? You can't. It's like I was talking about that story from Yale University offering a course in whiteness. How do you get a job with that? You don't. It's a joke. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, if we're going to San Francisco, we got to replace flowers in your hair with wearing a nuclear, biological, chemical warfare suit because that's where it looks like it's headed.
Yes.
What a joke! It's bad in New York too. You know, it's all the democratically run cities.
Yes.
You know, Chicago. I mean, it's the Democrats' fault, but it's also it's our government's fault. The Republicans, the Democrats, because they have basically laid waste to our infrastructure, our manufacturing. They got kickbacks, payoffs, and the places are all rotting away.
Yes.
The Rust Belt, you're right, Mike. It would take so much money to rebuild Like, you'd have to knock those buildings down. People don't realize you can't. Those buildings got to be knocked down. They're full of asbestos, and they're dangerous. They got to knock them down. They got to put new buildings. They're never going to be having new factories, Mike. I hate to tell people that. It's just, I can't see it.
Well, if we would stop going around the world plunging our collective nose into other countries' business we were to end all these wars and all these foreign military bases, we would have enough money to start working to put this nation back together. But as long as everybody thinks a war is their best solution, they won't look at any other possible solutions out there. We'll just start a war, and that'll distract everybody.
Yeah, but the problem is it's going to be a nuclear war, and there ain't going to be nobody left to do any reconstruction at that point. You know?
Yeah, it could be a real life on the beach.
Mike, what a joke. Like, the homeless people, I feel sorry for them, you know, because we talked about this before. Prices of real estate go up, but the problem is people can't afford to rent. There's people living in RVs or small trailers working in Silicon Valley. I don't know if people are aware of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the wealth inequality is fully on display there in Silicon Valley. The CEOs, executive officers of all these companies are multimillionaires, if not billionaires, and their own employees are, you know, again, as you said, they live in the cars while they have a full-time job at places like Google.
And, Mike, I wanted to just explain to people, inflation, basically, the prices of stuff's not going up. It's the value of the dollar is going down.
Yes.
That's inflation. You know, the prices are not going up. It's just the dollar's being devalued to be less what it's worth. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but when you buy like a Maxwell House coffee or something like that, it's slightly smaller at the same price.
Yes.
You know, or hamburger rolls are like the size of like White Castle rolls now, like some of them. You know,
well, even at McDonald's, the Big Mac hamburger, somebody set up a website. Apparently, it was a lifelong McDonald's worker, and he basically kept the boxes that were used to wrap the Big Mac sandwiches, and he basically showed them how they just were shrinking a little bit year after year after year. I mean, I remember when the Big Mac first came out, it was gigantic, and it wasn't all that expensive. And today it's this little tiny thing, and you know, very expensive.
Instead of where's the beef, where's the roll? Hey, Mike, eventually when you go buy a paper towel, roll of paper towels, there's going to be one sheet in there.
Yeah, it's going to be like that. We've noticed lately we had to re-engineer our toilet paper holders in the bathroom because it was originally just the one that would stick a little cup into both ends of the roll, and now the rolls have been made slightly narrower, and you try and pull the paper and it falls off, so I had to put in one of those with the solid rod all the way through the middle.
And Mike, I just want to say real quick, if we have a trade war with either Europe or China, we'll lose because we just don't have the manufacturing to compete against them. So a trade war would crush us. I mean, we would be. I mean, we're already being like boxed in. You know, I mean, I don't know how I do know how these people will react in Washington. You know, but like trade war, we'll lose. You know, there's just no way now. You know, it's not the same country we used to be.
Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. And
all right, thanks, Mike. Have
all
a
right,
good show.
thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And I mean, just look at our trade imbalance. It's gigantic. I used to think it was $1.5 billion a day flowing out of the country, but apparently it's actually a lot higher than that. We're going to take another phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Dustin's hit the nail right on the head. I would refer to that as kind of an inverse inflation, not because of the rising prices, but the falling dollar. He was very correct on that. Hey, you mentioned about the work visas and defending Obama's policies in the past, the Trump team now. And I had a caller last week that mentioned twice that he was forced out of his job for basically outsourcing his job to a foreign market that came in. And he had to train his predecessor who was taking his job, or if he did not and refused to do so, he wouldn't get his severance pay and leave. But and that's what a tactic that is, to strong-arm you to train the guy who's going to replace you. But, you know, here we're seeing these school shootings. If this was indeed a true one, I think it was a false flag. It looks all that way. But, you know, we haven't heard in a long time the old term going postal. And I think we may see that happening again with, you know, the higher-ups in white-collar who are being replaced for cheaper outsourced labor. I wouldn't be surprised. I think every man has his breaking point I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some white-collar people just flipping out and saying, I'm going to come back to work and I'm going to take care of some of these people who've ruined my life, ruined my career, ruined my livelihood. We haven't seen that yet, but don't count it out.
There have already been a few incidents, including one here in Hawaii a few years ago, where that happened. Again, they don't get reported. Nothing gets reported on the corporate media unless it serves somebody's political agenda. And otherwise, it's like the old Pravda in his Vestia during Soviet times. It's all fluffy news. It's all happy news. They don't report the bad stuff. I notice the media is still obsessed over Fergie's bad performance of the national anthem. Apparently was so bad, the NFL players stood up again. So that's what the media does. 4 disasters followed by a fashion show.
Yeah. Hey, last question for you, and I wanted to ask this because I took over from Michael Herzog.
I'm going to have to hold you over the commercial break. Steve, I'm going to have to hold you over the commercial break. Don't go away. I'll come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking with Steve Elkins. And, Steve, you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, I covered kind of this topic a little bit today. I was Michael Herzog on his show today, covering for him. But a question I have, and I would just like to get your opinion on it, but the question is, with these PSYOPs, these false flag operations where a team comes in and they're given a mission to kill, and even children or anybody, how in the heck do you think they accomplish that brainwashing to these guys to carry out these missions? I mean, we're talking MK Ultra? How are they possibly... Is this been reinstated, the MK Ultra program? Is there something going on that they're able to brainwash people to carry out these terrible things?
Well,
I'm just blown away that people could do this.
Well, probably a lot of these operatives are former military, spec ops people, trained snipers. So they're used to killing people on command, and they've gotten over the remorse that people feel about it. It's just another job and just another designated target. But again, going back to that 1991 book, Behold a Pale Horse, the specific mention was made that there were very powerful drugs that could be given to these people that would make them more willing to kill. We know that's certainly true with the prescription antidepressants.
Right. It just blows me away that somebody could do these things. We're not talking about the enemy on the other side, another country. We're talking about victimizing your own people. I mean, they must have families, they must have children, and how they can be brought to carry out these. I mean, basically, they're no better than the psychopath serial killer that kills while he's traveling along the road and throwing the body off to the side. I mean, this is kind of the same mindset of a serial killer, to kill with no remorse. It's amazing.
Well, I'm sure I'm sure that the government, looks for such people, to put onto these teams, and they recruit people who are willing to do these kinds of things, and they're very well paid. And like I said, probably a lot of them are former military, and they may also be very, stoned on certain drugs at the same time. You and I find it very impossible to think about doing something like that, but for somebody who is a trained professional killer, it's not a question of country and flag. It's, what's the next target? What's the next target? What's the next target?
Amazing. That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to start with Rick in North Carolina. And Rick, I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Just had I'm changing the subject a little bit. I've been watching YouTube a lot lately, and I'm seeing these guys doing these First Amendment audits on the police stations and military bases. I know if you were aware of it, but it appears to be a fairly good idea because they're streaming live, and it's kind of keeping the cops and stuff on the up and up, not being able to shoot them like sometimes they'll do. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but it just looks like a good thing maybe to help kind of take things back a little bit.
No, I wasn't aware of that. I do know that when you're in the military or the government, especially if you have a clearance, live streaming a video is going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, well, actually, it seems to be helping them because they're able to stand their ground and not get arrested and put in jail for doing a First Amendment activity that's been, as part of our laws that we're able to do that, go out and film the officers in action.
Okay, well, certainly worth looking for. Okay?
I'll send you a link if I know sometimes you say you don't like to open stuff up, and I don't blame you, but I'll send you something, recognize my name, then maybe you'll look at it.
Okay, I'll take a look.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, over in Great Britain, apparently things are getting very tense regarding the Brexit. In fact, it's reaching a dangerous point. The negotiators are still negotiating the soft Brexit, and apparently the latest impasse is the so-called Brexit divorce bill. Now, none of this was actually in the Charter for the European Union. The article that says you can leave simply says you can leave. There's nothing in there about a divorce bill, but Brussels is taking the position that Great Britain needs to pay Brussels for permission to leave, which has got a lot of people very upset. And apparently Brussels keeps asking for more and more money, to the point where Julia Hartley Brewer basically went on a rant and told Brussels they can F off. So it's getting a little bit testy. Now, one of the pieces of propaganda that Brussels has been using to try and reverse Brexit was to describe people who voted for the Brexit as uneducated and ignorant and really too stupid to be allowed into a voting booth. But apparently some of Britain's best and brightest minds have banded together to form a new pro-Brexit group, specifically to counteract the propaganda that Brexit supporters are dim-witted. These are some very intelligent people, and they're making a very good case why Brexit is good for Great Britain. And it really, really is. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and to sort of move backward in the talking points a bit. The Clinton people, the Clinton camp, are already out there saying that Mueller's Russian indictments are a complete vindication of everything that they've been saying about Donald Trump collusion and Russian hacking. No, they're not. They're merely indictments. And there doesn't seem to be anything to back them up, because the indictment was basically a cut and paste from this 2015 article on Radio Free Europe's website. And when he came out with those things, I said, this is a pure political theater. There's never going to be any actual trials. This is just so Hillary's people can say what they're already out there starting to say. Now, I'm getting a report here that the Department of Justice is getting ready to subpoena James Comey, Clapper, and Brennan for another round of testimony in the Steele dossier FISA probe. So that's what's happening over there. Getting on back to Great Britain and Brexit, there's a very alarming story. And again, it shows how far people are apparently willing to go to get their way against the will of the voters. And apparently there is a group called Renew Britain, and it's described the new anti-Brexit party as the military arm of the Remain movement, whose stated purpose will be to threaten sitting MPs who back Brexit and basically try and get them to reconsider and change their vote ahead of the parliamentary vote. Now, I'm not really sure about the laws in Great Britain. It's been many years since I was there. But I'm pretty certain, it's safe to assume, that there are laws against threatening members of Parliament, just like there are laws against threatening members of Congress. But I mean, this is how desperate these people are to keep pushing their dream of a global new world order. And I'm sure that Soros is behind this. And now he's got to worry about a Frexit. Apparently, Le Pen's former aide, Marine Le Pen's former aide, Florian Philippot, is calling for France to leave the EU, saying, we just can't continue. Leaving the EU is the only way to save France. And France has also been hit hard by this open border policy. In Paris, there's violence, feces on the street, trash everywhere, and France depends quite a bit on tourism. for its revenue. And now one of the biggest tourist attractions in the entire nation is being deteriorated, the same way that San Francisco is. So Florian went on to say that patriotism is the policy of the future. Ooh, bad nationalist, bad nationalist. No cookie. Now here's an interesting little story. Came out of fortrus.com. Swiss parliamentarians rush to oversee that Putin doesn't cheat. As you know, on March 18th, Russia's going to have their elections. Putin is running for another term of office. And so there's a delegation of Swiss parliamentarians that will participate as observers to make sure everything is on the up and up. And the Russian Central Election Commission is allowing about 1,000 foreign observers to monitor the elections. Now, this is all voluntary on behalf of the RCEC. It's not coerced, as some Western media have implied. What I want to know is, where were all the foreign impartial observers during the 2016 election here in the U.S.? Oh, that's right, they were forbidden to come here. Saudi Arabia is now out there saying that European businesses are helping Iran finance terrorism. And they're out there saying that a large percentage of the Iranian economy is controlled by the Revolutionary Guards and companies associated with the Guards. And we believe that any dealings with those companies only serve to enrich the Revolutionary Guards and cause them to cause more mischief within the region and the world. Now, a couple of problems with that. By the way, this is Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir in an interview on CNBC. A couple of problems. Iran isn't the one running all over the place causing mischief. The gold medal for mischief making goes to the United States. Israel's going to have to settle for the silver. But what they're setting up here is twofold. A call for more sanctions against Iran by Europe, which so far has refused to go along because they've suffered so bad from all the other sanctions going on. And of course, it's part of the propaganda run-up. Iran is bad, Iran is evil, Iran is bad. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in 200 years. It's not in their nature. It's not in their nature. Now, getting on back to the United Nations, you guys are going to love this one. The United Nations top children's rights campaigner has been arrested for pedophilia. And he was arrested for raping a 12-year-old boy, and he's admitted to 5 other rapes as well. This is Peter Newell, and he wrote the manual on children's rights that was published by UNICEF. One of our callers was talking about losing our moral compass. Yeah. I want to know if this guy was on prescription antidepressants, because I think that is a real major problem, and it explains a lot of the bizarre behavior that we're seeing. Because one of these things these medications do, it gets in the way of impulse control. You'll get an impulse, you just go with it. One of the stories from ssristories.org is about a kid who attempted suicide. And they got to him in time. When it was all over, they said, "Why'd you do it?" And he said, "I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I went with it." We all know about the mass shootings associated with these drugs. We know about the suicides associated with these drugs. But it's not a binary situation. You're perfectly okay, now you're a mass shooter. It's a continuum. And there are other areas where these medications are going to change your behavior. How you work, how you think, how you drive. And of course, there's the issue that there's no moral guidance left in society. Both parents have to work. Kids are being raised by TV and social media. They're not getting any moral education. Religion is on the wane. And kids, everybody's looking at our political leaders and realizing they don't have a moral compass. And it works for them. They're rich. Why should I be a moral human being if being immoral is the way to fame and fortune? But I do have an issue with hurting children. Now, I used to live in Los Angeles. I'm an easygoing guy, whatever consenting adults want to do. 3 or 4 common household appliances. Fine. I don't care. Little children, some very primitive instincts kick in. Because it's not just the fact of the sex and the power. You're stealing their youth and innocence from them. And once you do that, they can't get it back. It's like when you find out the red elf at the North Pole doesn't really exist. You can't go back to believing. Now, Vladimir Putin has done something I absolutely agree with. First offender pedophiles are sentenced to life in prison. And hopefully that's going to deter some of this behavior out there. Because it's not just being in prison. Prison populations, they have a hierarchy. There's a social order based on the crime that you've committed. And child molesters are right at the very bottom. And they get abused a lot. So good for Vlad on that one. Now, over at Oxfam, which is supposed to be this charity helping the Haitians, it came out a short while ago that the staff down in Haiti were living in luxury accommodations and having some wild parties that included prostitutes. And apparently about 7,000 people have now canceled their regular donations to Oxfam. Yeah, of course. If you donate to a charity, you want the money to go to the charity. And a lot of charity, well, look at the Clinton Foundation, for example. And there was that big stink, I think it was about 3 years ago, where this company that ran 8 different cancer charities just kept the money for themselves. None of it was donated to cancer or cancer patients. If you want to help your community, go out and get directly involved. Don't just sit there, write a check, and think you've done all you can do. And prior to Claire taking on her choir, we would spend that night at the food distribution at the local church, actually making sure that the food we had bought got to those people. There were no shenanigans going on over there. We're going to take a phone call from James in Tokyo. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Sorry about your car. I have to apologize. I didn't realize it was yours.
Okay. Well, listen, as long as I got you on the line, could you send me back my my night eyeglasses? They were in the driver's side door pocket, and I really do need those.
You got it. Hey, you sound a lot better than last month. But to make sure that you're the real Rivero and not a Russian clone from Chaos, please respond to the following code. It sometimes rains in Tokyo. But anyway, I want to talk about the Florida shooting.
Okay.
I was talking to a friend of mine in Florida, not about the shooting, but he asked me, did you hear about the shooting? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, my kids went to that school, and, well, he's a sheriff, and he said I was one of the respondents. And I asked him, I saw on the internet and stuff that one of the students said that they were walking with the shooter, and she heard gunshots, and another person said multiple shooters. What do you say about that? He said it's all BS because the school. I said, how do you know? He said because the school had it all down on video. So he kind of put that thing to rest.
Well, we haven't seen the video just yet. And, we have seen the video of the girl saying that she was talking to the guy. We know that this David Hogg, who's the darling of the corporate media, apparently his father's an FBI agent, his mother's a VIP at CNN. In fact, somebody just sent me some photos of this kid actually at CNN, walking around with the plastic tags and everything. So apparently he's looking at a career in the corporate media already.
Well, I'm just telling you what my friend said, and I've known him for 34 years. He's an ex-Marine, really honest guy. And that's what he told me. So, he said he saw it. And I don't know why the media hasn't mentioned it, but I'm sure it'll come out. I guess they don't want to show everybody it because it's so terrible. It was actually so bad. My friend said, tomorrow I'm taking off and from work. I'm just going to go fishing. It was really bad to see. So, bad stuff.
Okay.
But I just want to let you know. And I'm glad that you're feeling better, and I hope Claire gets better.
Me too.
All right, take care, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, unfortunately, because of that gigantic pothole, it was big enough to have an echo. I didn't see it in time to swerve around it, and we hit it, and Claire, her back is messed up again. And she was just starting to get better, so we're back to square one, and I hope we're not going to have to do the laser spine surgery, but it just is taking a very, very long time to heal. All right, getting on back to the news, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. It's February, as you already know, and down under in New Zealand, it's snowing. Now, they're still in their summer, and they have got this huge cold snap, and apparently some of New Zealand's ski fields are thinking about opening early this year. Human-caused global warming strikes again. Now, Delingpole is out there with another article. This is over at Breitbart.com. And once again, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has been caught cooking the books on global warming. Well, they're not cooking it in the warming side. What they're doing is they're leaving out some of the extreme cold and snow that we've been going through this winter, and basically trying to change the lines to make it look like if it isn't getting warmer, at least it's not getting colder. Now, the fact that NOAA is doing this signals that global warming is still, in some manner, an official project to get us to pay carbon taxes and to let some global authority tell us how to live our lives. And there's another article that came on out that I think really shows what's going on. And this was over in Waking Times, and it says, why scientific peer review is a sham. And it talks about the fact that originally peer review was a means of validating scientific theory. You would do your experiment, you'd write your report, it would be sent to a publication, they would send it to a group of other scientists who would say, and say, check this out, look for mistakes in the numbers, and give us a review. And if all those other scientists came back and said this looks legit, then you were published. And that's the way you're supposed to check against bogus science. But unfortunately, over the last several years, that peer review process has become compromised. And the list of scientists that these papers are sent to are usually agenda-driven. For example, papers on global cooling are sent to scientists who are supporters of global warming. And as a result, the process has become corrupted. And this is why I think that everybody should know their own science. We should be teaching it in school so that we stop being forced to rely on some guy with a clipboard and a white laboratory coat to tell us what's going on. Because we know we get lied to a lot about global warming, about vaccines, and so forth. We're going to take a break here for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line as soon as we return from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go to the phones with Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. What's on my mind, Mike, is the early report that you, in the first hour of your show, and you spoke about Syria possibly joining the SDF and the PKK and the rest of the Kurds. I'm not buying it. The Kurds have already been busted using Syrian flags to keep the Turks from bombing them and saying that they've cut a deal with the Syrian Arab Army, which nobody has been able to factualize just yet. Okay, and two, you don't have Putin or Iran saying anything about Turkey bombing Syria. So that tells me this is another psychic warfare job, and they're trying. And the U.S. and Israel is behind it, and they're trying to get Turkey and Syria to fight one another. And
well,
as long
they've
as I
already
don't see
succeeded.
Putin saying
They've already
anything-
succeeded because Turkey is bombarding Syrian positions inside Syria. Now, nobody said that the SDK and anything had come on board. It was simply Syria's government forces made a deal with the Kurds to come on into Afrin and push Turkey back, at which point Turkey has started shooting. So the shooting is already underway.
Yeah, the shooting may be underway, but what I'm saying is pay close attention to what Putin is, because Putin has been on the phone with Erdogan, and let's see what Putin says about it. But your point is well taken, but let's just see how it shakes out. And the second thing is,
well, before we go to the second thing, before we go to the second thing here, I'm sure that Putin is trying to get Erdogan to back down because Putin understands this is a flashpoint that the U.S. is going to exploit to come on back into Syria, try and get Assad, possibly start shooting at more Russians.
Well, yeah, definitely. But if I think Erdogan, he may be crazy, but he's not that crazy. He don't want to have to deal with Putin a second time. So, but okay, so if we can go to the second thing about the guy who wrote the child protection laws over at the UNICEF or whatever, I'm not buying that it is psychotropic drugs. Some people are some men are into women, some men are into men. I just read an article where, some people just busted the gardener for, having sex with their dog, the landscaping guy for having sex with their dog. But like you, I draw the line on children, okay? And I say to Vladimir Putin, cast them down with the rest of the sodomite. In fact, cast them so deep that they will never be able to see doors or windows again. And I don't care if they incarnate in their next life on the same level with the rest of the sodomites, where they can just eat each other alive, however they do it. But the thing is that that there's no excuse for that. There's no to ruin a young soul like that. There's just no excuse for it.
I absolutely agree. But I still think it's legitimate to ask in all of these cases of this bizarre behavior if, in fact, prescription antidepressants represent a contributing factor. Anyway, Lenny, we got to let you go. Got to do station ID, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to take a phone call now from Jeff in Georgia. Jeff, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, good to talk to you. 3 quick points, if I could. One, the caller just called in about Parkland or Florida, about that mass shooting. It didn't happen. Michael, to me, that is Jewish psyops at its optimum. All of these shootings happened. There, Las Vegas, Sandy Hook, they all happened, Michael. And they're trying to tag you and the listeners with lunacy. 2, fiat system, fiat money. Money doesn't have to be backed by anything. You just have to control the quantity. The greatest monetary systems that I know of was early Pennsylvania. They printed money. They controlled the quantity. England, for 700 years, 700 years, had the tally stick. It was based on a piece of wood that the king controlled the quantity of money. 3, tariffs. Tariffs are good. We have to employ African Americans, Hispanic, white. The only way we're going to build this economy where we are self-sustaining is we make our own products. Okay, we have 12 million people in manufacturing. China has 100 million. We have to grow manufacturing. We have to grow other sectors, and we have to put these teenagers, young people to work. America first means all of our people first. And by the way, a lot of this goods that we are importing, we would consider that slave labor. That was my points, Michael. Thank you for listening.
Okay, well, I want to respond to your last one. I agree in theory with what you say. The problem is we've run out of resources. And there's a story I used to tell about this guy who inherits a farm. And he likes to stand out in front, and I'm a farmer, but he doesn't know how to farm. And so the bills are coming on in, and so one day he just decides, well, I'm not really using the tractor. I'm going to sell that. And so he takes the tractor over to the farm equipment dealer, and he sells the tractor, and he pays his bills. And he's standing around there on his farm looking proud with his ownership. Then next it's going to be the harvester, and then he sells the combine, and then he sells the topsoil of the farm off. And he's still standing around thinking everything is fine, but it isn't. Because the farm is no longer a farm. It's just an empty husk, and he does not have the means to turn it back into a farm. And that is the situation the United States currently is in. Because we'd love to see our infrastructure repaired. We would like to see our factories rebuilt. We'd like to have jobs for all these Americans who've been out of work for months and years. But right now, the entire economy is focused on leading us into a world war. And unfortunately, our political leadership, they're like that guy who inherited the farm. They don't really know what they're doing. All they know how to do is, let's do what works for right now, and we're not going to think about the long term.
Michael, once we overthrow, nonviolently of course, the banking system, the power will come back to the people, and everything will change. These same people that control banking control our defense. They control our foreign policy. They control our culture. Everything will change. They are coming after RBN with all of these psyops. I'm sure that guy that called in 2 or 3 calls ago that says he was sure that was a fake shoot. That was a real shooting. Real young people died in that. There's a lot of pain down there.
Yes.
You can't trivialize that stuff. Once we overthrow that banking system, everything will change. You'll be on the radio in 2 years. If we overthrew that tomorrow, we wouldn't be talking about Russia or the Middle East. We'd be talking about foreign policy would be what's happening in the Caribbean, what's happening in Mexico. I don't care about that other part of the world. The only reason that we talk about the Middle East is because we look at the world through a Jewish cartel prism. And they will use WASP today, and when they're gone, they'll use African Americans tomorrow. They'll use Hispanics the next day. They will control. They used the French 200 years ago when they funded Napoleon at Waterloo. They'll never stop until we overthrow that, and then everything will change. But it is natural for any sovereign country to employ its own people, to build its own items. I mean, we see massive. Hey, God bless the Indians, the South Asian Indians, but they own all these gas stations. It's like, my God, if the African Americans own them, wouldn't that be great, for all of us? It goes right on down the line. We have let them control all the sectors that make up our country, and that has to stop. But the monetary system, it can be based on fiat. When our monetary system was based on gold in the 1930s, we still had 25% unemployment. Okay? And if it's based on a commodity, that commodity will be manipulated by the same manipulators that run the system now. They're coming after us because we're looking for a voice that we can get at their jugular vein, non-violently, of course. We're going to overthrow them because we're a sovereign country. Trump said America first, and I'm going to make him live up to that. I don't trust the man, but I'm going to make him live up to what he said he was supposed to be doing when he got in here. He's supposed to be making peace. He's supposed to be looking out for our country first, and that's the natural state of any country, unless they redefine what a country is. A country is sovereign if it's not anything. And it's not run by 1% if it calls itself a republic. It has to be run by all the people. I've never gotten over being a WASP on what my forefathers unknowingly done to the native Indians. We wiped them out. We took everything they had.
Okay, well, let
In the
me
same
cut in here.
day.
Let me cut in here a little bit and respond to some of what you said. First of all, in terms of people calling into the show and saying there are no dead bodies at Parkland, or trust me, there's security camera video that shows that it was just the single lone shooter and everything like that. We're seeing a replay of what we saw right after the Mandalay Bay shooting, where there was a lot of junk being dumped on to the independent media just to try and keep the issue confused. To try and delay the formation of a common public consensus. So it's basically a replay of that. But at this point, I think everybody agrees it was a false flag, and the fine details don't really matter anymore. Now, obviously, I agree with you about getting rid of private central banking. Unfortunately, while the private central bankers have all this money, they have all the politicians. And that's why I keep saying we're going to have to wait for this whole system to come crashing down and stand up and start a new country with a lot of your good suggestions. And we're going to have to just write it right into the Constitution. There will be no private central bankings because these families that own these banks have been playing this scam on the world for 300 years. And they are the richest families on earth, all on the backs of other workers. And it really, enough is really enough. And of course, bankers, if they're not making enough money, they love to start wars because wars are the bankers' richest harvest of debt. And debt is what they want to control and use to control everything else. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks.
I'm just for, reform. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the show. Now, many times before, I have mentioned that I'm not big into computer games, which is weird because I actually worked on a couple early in my career. But I just don't. The one exception is flight simulators. I love flight simulators. And one of the best, of course, is Microsoft's Flight Simulator. And I have an older version. I think it's Flight Simulator X. But apparently there is now a problem with the latest update from Microsoft's Flight Simulator add-on Wrangler, Flight Sim Labs. Now, it was featuring updates to the Airbus A320 model. But then apparently users found that as well as all the enhancements and good things in this new version, there was a password harvester for Chrome built inside the software. Now, whether that came from Flight Sim Labs or from Microsoft or was someplace along the supply chain, which is another issue, that's still a very, very nasty thing to have in a commercial product. And it does, in fact, actually happen. There was a company, one of the places where I did work on computer games, and can't even remember, well, it doesn't really matter, but it was in Santa Monica. And this was back in the days when games came on these 3.5-inch hard floppy disks, and they were coding for the Amiga, and I was an Amiga developer. And it was a space shuttle simulator. And they did a lot of work on it. It was a very good game. And then they made up the master disk to go to the duplicator packager, but they forgot to format that master disk. They just copied everything onto it, not realizing the disk was infected with malware. And so it went on out to the customer base. The customer's base's machines got infected and drove the company right out of business. There have been allegations that the distributors of software get compromised, that they get hacked into, and regular professional higher-end software gets something added to it just prior to the duplication stage. So it's out of control. Cybercrime is completely out of control, and no, it is not the Russians. Okay. Apparently, Samsung has provided confirmation that iPhone X sales are way below Apple's estimate for the much-hyped 10th anniversary special. And the miscalculation could end up benefiting Android owners. Now, first of all, this is a $1,000 phone. That facial reading security system has got some major, major problems. And again, $1,000 really is, unfortunately, too much for a phone. It really is. And apparently, news of public demand for the $1,000 phone is falling far short of expectations. And apparently, it really showed up over the Christmas holidays, where Bloomberg reported that what was supposed to be an initial order of 50 million units had been reduced to 30 million. But Apple may have downgraded demand estimates even further. And the Nikkei now confirms that Samsung, Apple's panel supplier, is cutting production in response to Apple's lower expectations. They made it too expensive. In this economy, you can't do that. Apple's business model, in fact, the business model for the entire computer and software industry is new everything every 5 years. Money, 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 money. And in a healthy economy where people have got disposable income, yeah, they can treat themselves to the newest and latest, greatest version of their cell phone, even though the old one is working just fine. That model doesn't work in this day and age. Planned obsolescence is a dead concept, which is why Microsoft, at least, is trying to get everybody into subscription-based computing services. So the money will continue to flow on in. Now, don't get me wrong, I like my iPhone 7. I also liked my iPhone 5. But the only reason I upgraded was Claire destroyed her phone by accident. And when we went on in to the AT&T store and said, we need a replacement, they basically said a deal. You can have these for all this. And our phone bill actually went down, and we got 2 free iPads with that, so I can't complain about that. Now, article out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, fast food robots are appearing in restaurants in larger numbers. And apparently what they do is they have this huge machine that is back where the human beings used to be. And you will type in your order, and you will pay by plastic. And apparently the entire kitchen is now automated. I'm sure there's somebody back there who's shoving buns and meat and sauce into the various hoppers. And it makes up your meal, and it delivers it out to you. And I will not do business with a place like that. And partly it's health. I don't eat fast food restaurants anyway. But mostly it's because nobody is realizing that this rush to automation is putting more strain on our economy. Every job lost to automation is another person unable to pay their bills, unable to take care of their family. We could actually see a return of sabotage. And that actually originated from in France back in, I think, the 1800s. They wanted to automate a textile factory. And the workers were so upset over it, they threw their shoes into the gears to break the machine. Hence, sabotage. Story out here. Experts are predicting that 1 out of every 5 jobs will be lost to robots in the next decade. Do they not understand that this is a bad direction? Carried to its ultimate, we're talking about shopping malls staffed by robots, featuring goods made by robots, and they're all standing around doing nothing. There are no customers coming in, because nobody has a job and nobody has the money to buy the products. The whole system will grind to a halt. Now, I'm not anti-technology here, but I am trying to be pragmatic about this, that we should actually have laws protecting human jobs. I used to think the decade of greed was over, but apparently it isn't. And the wealth inequality has just reached this extreme in this country. We're still the richest country on earth, but all that wealth is concentrated in the top 0.1% of the population. People who can buy an entire island out here in Hawaii, while we have 8,000 homeless people on this rock. That shouldn't be working. Now then, Apple has finally released a fix for the devastating text bomb bug. So you might want to run the update on your iPhone. And apparently the bug was uncovered last week, and it crashes apps that display a letter from the South Indian language Telugu. And typing or receiving a message that contains that letter causes messaging apps such as WhatsApp and Gmail to crash. If the symbol appears in a notification, handsets can get stuck in a boot loop, endlessly restarting without booting up. I wonder how they goofed that one up. But the fix is out there for your iPhone, so just hit that update button and get that taken care of. Now, as you know, there are a lot of white hat security researchers, and that's what they consider themselves to be. Companies that will basically look for problems in software, and they will publish reports on them. And you would think in a common sense society that you would have the computer and software companies rushing to fix the problems. I mean, most of these companies have pretty much fired off their quality assurance staff, and they wait for the users to complain before they fix something. And then you have tech news sites like CSO and Ars Technica that are out there putting out these reports to the public. And apparently the computer companies are not happy about that, because people are looking at these websites and saying, maybe I shouldn't buy this particular machine or that particular piece of software. And so apparently Steve Reagan, who's a staff writer at CSO, and Dan Goodin at Ars Technica were named as defendants in two separate lawsuits. Now, the cases are different, but they have a common theme. They are being sued by companies covered in articles they wrote. So that apparently is the new approach to computer and software problems by the computer and software makers. We're going to sue the people who point out the problems. I don't think that's going to be a productive way of going. But again, computers and software are indemnified against civil lawsuits. You can't sue them. Same with vaccines. And now, apparently, according to the story we had just yesterday, they're expanding that to other major corporations. They're making it more difficult for ordinary people to sue corporations who put out crappy products. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a member just posted a story to what really happened called Trump going after Obama after Department of Justice hands down indictments that tell everything. Unfortunately, when I click the link, the website is showing a database error. And let's see, what did we go? Oh, I found it in another source here. Yeah, apparently Trump is taking on Obama for not taking action against the Russian election interference. That's where Mueller really messed up, because his indictments against these 13 Russian nationals puts the responsibility for their being in this country and engaging in this fraud right in the middle of Obama's administration. And supposedly Obama knew what was going on and did nothing about it whatsoever. Getting on back to computer news here. This is a major Bex alert, and to nobody's surprise, it's coming out of the Washington Compost. North Korea poised to launch large-scale cyber attacks, says new report. More North Korea bashing. North Korea is quietly expanding both the scope and sophistication of its cyber weaponry, laying the groundwork for more devastating attacks. And then they go on back saying that Kim Jong-un's cyber warriors have been accused of causing huge destruction in recent years, including the massive hack on Sony Pictures in 2014 and last year's WannaCry ransomware. Now, first of all, the Sony hack was later admitted to being an internal leak, and nobody knows where WannaCry came from. This is just more gratuitous propaganda leading to military action in North Korea. I think it was Senator Hiram Johnson who said the first casualty in war is always the truth. Now, here's an interesting little story. There's a guy over in Albuquerque, Frank Dickman Jr., and he's suing Microsoft for a new copy of Windows 7 after his machine upgraded to Windows 10 without his knowledge. And he's threatening that if he does not get his new copy of Windows 7, he's going to ask for $600 million in damages. And I'm sure he'll get the copy of Windows 7. But yes, that forced upgrade was extraordinarily messy. It killed a lot of machines. Microsoft is just not really working on making a good product anymore. Now, I'll be fair. Rather, in wanting to be fair, a while ago, when that free upgrade was still coming on out, I allowed one of the laptop used by Claire's choir to go from Windows 7 to Windows 10, and it was an unmitigated disaster. For one thing, it erased all of the existing data files for the music software. And I don't mean just put them in the trash bin where I can recover them. I mean, they were just gone. And Windows 10 is just a pain to use. Now, I do have a newer Windows 10 machine, which I'm going to be putting into service here in the studio. And because it's only going to do one thing, I'm not going to have to deal with the interface. But it's so difficult to use. That little panel of tiles with all the flashing ads, I wish I could figure out how to turn that off. I don't even know what they call it. But it's not really an easy-to-use machine. In fact, it seems more geared to just selling you more stuff, to just throw more ads at you all the time. But Microsoft has become very abusive in that. And they really ought not to do that. I worked in advertising for a lot of years because in the early days of computer animation, only commercials could afford the high dollar per second cost of computer animation. That was back when I worked with Robert Abel. And so I hung out with a lot of advertising people, and I went through the planning of a lot of commercials. The one thing you never do is annoy the viewer or listener, because you're not going to get a sale. And unfortunately, with online advertising and all the stuff in the computer, because they count the ad success by clicks or views, there's no feedback loop. The people who are the clients of the advertisers don't really know if the ads are effective or not. They just hope they are. And unfortunately, I guess in these hard economic times, they're just getting more and more aggressive. We're getting all these annoying telemarketers, and we're on all the do not call lists, and they're just ignoring it. It's all about grinding as much money out of the population before it all comes apart. Okay, now we're coming up here on another commercial break. We've got about a half hour to go here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And when we come on back, we've got some science and health news that we're going to be talking about, along with a very bizarre story involving the terracotta warriors. So stay tuned. Feel free to call on in, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before I answer the phone calls that have come on in here, I have to comment again on corporate media. I have Fox News running here in the studio. The sound is turned off, but the captioning is turned on so I can get the gist of what's going on. And two stories that they were running during the commercial break. The first one is apparently another woman has come forward to claim that Donald Trump sexually harassed her by kissing her for 2 minutes in the lobby of Trump Tower. And Trump has come on back and said, first of all, he's not stupid enough to do something like that in a lobby with all those security cameras. And then he reminded everybody about that one woman who accused him, who had her mortgage paid off by a Clinton backer. But the second story is the one that's very concerning. They're trying to magnify the effect of these 13 Russians who, it is claimed, stole the election from Hillary Clinton by saying that they were running all kinds of bots, and they make a specific mention of saying they're pushing conspiracy theories. So that's going to be the next thing. Anybody pushing a conspiracy theory is a Russian agent. So that's what's coming on down the line. All right, let's take some phone calls. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yes, at the beginning of your show, you were talking about the fact that it looks like America wants to go to Russia. It's insane. And I was thinking about it here in this place in the Philippines here. It's a condotel. I own a small condo in this place. But anyway, they couldn't sell all the condos, so they made it into a hotel. But there's people here. I've met Russians here. There's Chinese. A lot of Chinese come here. Koreans, Japanese, Australians, South Africans, people from Saudi Arabia. There's everything. And nobody's fighting each other, you know. It's the governments, especially the American government, for some, I guess because they have to make money off of, I can't understand why they want to go to war all the time. It has to be because they're making money off of the weapons industry.
Well, that's only partly it. Basically, what it comes down to is the United States is on the verge of collapse, and the government thinks getting into a world war, if it doesn't actually fix things, at least they've got something to blame it all on. And they did this in World War I, crash of 1907, World War I, crash of 1929, World War II, crash of 2008, and here we are on the brink of the Third World War, and this one is going to be nasty.
So it's a repeat of the Roman Empire almost to an extent. I want to recommend the people, if you haven't seen it, there's a song on, you can watch it on YouTube, Randy Newman. It's just a few words in defense of my country, our country or something. He says the end of the empire is messy at best, so it's getting pretty messy now. Okay, I thank you, Mike, for letting me be on. Take it easy.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Sherry in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, hi. What's on my mind is I went through a thing when Mitt Romney was having his debates with Obama, and Romney was really polished and everything, and he did well, and I started getting really depressed because of his mission statement. He had made a mission statement at the end of these debates, and his Obama's was to give everyone a chance and all this stuff. And, you know, yes, you can, and all that was his mantra. But Mitt Romney said he wanted to be, quote, a powerful military force in the world for democracy. And that got me really, really nervous. And now he's going to be in the Senate, and I was just wondering if he still wants to force our military on the rest of the world. I mean, it gives the Republicans an extra vote in the Senate, but what about his mission statement? What about what he wanted to accomplish if he got to be president? And I got so depressed about that and fear-based about it that I went through it felt like Kennedy had died or something. I was in a black place. Monday morning, I woke up. I knew everything was going to be all right. The election was the next day, and I thought we're going to be okay. So I knew Obama was going to win, and he did. But what about that mission statement? Does he still feel that way? And was that just rhetoric so we could move forward with more war?
Well, basically, he was sending a message. He was sending a message to the bankers and to the military-industrial complex. I'm your man. Support me, and I will make sure that you guys are making a lot of money and have a lot of things to do.
Well, is he going to be in the Senate now? Is he in there now?
I imagine, yeah, he's going to be seated almost immediately. It was a special election, right?
I don't know all that stuff. No. I haven't been following that. I've been following other things, but not that. All I remember is how he felt when he was running for office. He wanted to be that powerful military force in the world for democracy, and I just knew we were going to be under martial law. But you know what? Everyone was so beaten down from so many terms of serving. I don't know what you call it now. But the guys, they thought they would only be there till Christmas, and then it was another round, and then another round. I think we were just all so war weary that it must have pushed Obama forward in the polls because the thought of more war was just, and I was wondering if he's in the Senate, is he going to, I hope Obama remembers, I hope, excuse me, Trump remembers his mission statement, because I don't want them to put the whole body in a position where they're going to vote on that and see Romney lapse back into that rhetoric. I just couldn't stand it because he was so determined to have war.
Well, apparently we're on the path to war. Everybody's gotten together, our Congress, the bankers, the military-industrial complex. They've already decided we're going to go to war. We don't care how many million people we kill, but right now war is our best option to get out of this mess that we've created.
Yeah. Well, I think Trump must have been pressured somehow to get him in. I can't imagine he'd want someone for war in there. I just can't imagine that. That's all.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't up to Trump. It was up to the voters that Romney became a senator. But I think he's angling to run in 2020.
Oh no. Well, it'll be interesting to see what his mission statement or purpose for running is then. I hope it's not the same thing it was. That's all.
I hope not either. But at this point, Trump is going to be a single-term president. And so there are probably a lot of Republicans out there saying they're going to throw the hat in the ring for 2020. My concern is that Hillary is starting to sound like she's going to take another try at it.
Oh, I can't imagine that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Time will solve that mystery.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I don't feel as nervous as I did before when he was going to run. So maybe that's good. But boy, I was in a dark place. And then when, Monday morning I woke up, it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to be okay. Because even though Obama, they always teased him about this shot across the bow, and they said he's not being forceful enough, and I thought, good, because we need a break. Not that there wasn't war still going, but it wasn't going the direction it was going in under the Bushes and everything. And I thought we need a break, and we got one enough to wake up. And now I'm hoping people remember what he said back then, because they're going to have to think, do I want this? And does he still want to do that? And that's what I wanted to get across.
Well, if he runs in 2020, then I expect his mission statement will be exactly the same.
I would think.
Because he wants to send that message to the bankers and the war machine, I am on your side.
I can't think it's going to go over very well the second time around. So I think
it depends on how good his vote riggers are. Because that's what our elections have become, a contest between election riggers. And whoever's got the best election riggers gets to win. 2016 was the exception to that rule. Hillary had all the best riggers on her side, but the American people were so disgusted with her that they just overwhelmed the election fraud and put Trump into the White House. And the deep state's been going ballistic ever since.
Yeah. Well, we have some time. We still have some time between now and then, so to pull everyone together and keep, like you say at the end of every show, spread that word, and that's the best we can do.
Well, at this point, I'm more concerned about the impending World War III, which I think it has to start this year. And if it does go nuclear and we lose, then we don't have to worry about the elections in 2020.
I don't think it's going to go nuclear. What I'm worried about the most is people getting hacked and their personal. People. I have a friend that she never got hacked. She never had any problem, and now she has. And it's like, gosh, if you're getting hacked, everyone's getting hacked. And it was
it's out of control. Cybercrime is just completely out of control. And for all we know, all of these ransomwares and everything coming out of the NSA, because they don't seem to be doing much of anything else. They're not finding terrorists. They're not finding criminals. They're just stealing all of our data, and they're developing these hacker tools. And now they've gone wild. But again, getting on back to this idea about nuclear war. I mean, the reality is, I don't think the United States can win a conventional war against Russia and China. And on the day when they realize that, yes, it will go nuclear. It may even happen sooner than that. We ended World War II with nuclear weapons. We might start World War III with nuclear weapons. Remember, a couple weeks ago, there was this report coming on out about how insiders in Washington, D.C. were concerned because there was actually talk of just hauling off an unprovoked first strike nuclear attack on Russia and getting it over with. Paul Craig Roberts reported that.
China will step in then. I mean, Russia and China together, I don't think we're that stupid. Maybe we are. But isn't the cyber attacks, isn't that a form of war too?
Yes, it
is.
If
they hit people and they hit the industries and things start shutting down and, well, it's going to be an interesting tax season to see how many people can survive having to go online to get their taxes and giving all that information out. We'll just, I think there's going to be a lot more cyber stuff, but because that's a clean war, in a sense, but it does disable everybody too. So I don't know.
Well, again, given how critical the internet is to our economy, it doesn't really seem like our government is putting that much effort into securing it, other than around the government's computers. And as far as everybody else, it's open season on ordinary law-abiding American people. We're constantly under attack. My server's constantly under attack. The new server's handling it a lot better than the old server. I probably got about, I think it was 8 emails today carrying malware.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to get any better. That's the thing. Just interesting. I thank you. I think that covers it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Coming up here on the end of the program, a couple of science and health stories. Down in Cape Town, South Africa, they've got this major drought, and the government of South Africa has just declared this a national disaster. And they've been under this drought for 3 years, and one has to wonder why some form of action wasn't taken in year 1 or year 2. Now, there's a story that's out here today about how there's this super graphene membrane that has created this amazing water purification system. And that's always an issue. And by the way, you can go over to the survival stores and get filtering systems that will actually take sewage and produce drinkable water from it. I don't know what it tastes like. I haven't tried that yet. But apparently Natural Blaze is reporting on this graphene membrane, and it's just this incredible water filter. Or something else. I mean, build a pipeline. Or go down to Antarctica, grab one of those icebergs that are floating around there, and boogie back on up to South Africa, and there'll still be enough of it left there where you can harvest that for water. But I do think Cape Town, I think the government of South Africa just waited too long. They just sat there waiting and hoping it was going to be better. It was going to be better. That Al Gore, was going to come in and bring snow and rain and who knows what all else. But it's a big, big problem. Now then, we have talked before about how supermarkets are using glyphosate as a food preservative. That they'll actually spray the produce on the produce stands with glyphosate because it retards decay. And unfortunately, of course, glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen, according to the World Health Organization. So we have our supermarkets feeding us food that could give us all cancer to save a few bucks on food spoilage. Well, apparently there's another one out there now. This is a story out of Natural News. And apparently there is this freshness preserver technology that is actually applied at the moment of harvest. And it's patented as Smart Fresh technology. If it's applied to produce after the harvest, it goes by the name Harbista in apple and pear orchards, and bananas know it as Ripe Lock. But it's basically the active ingredient is the same. And it is, I hope I can say this correctly, 1-methylcyclopropene, or 1-MCP. This is a synthetic chemical that tricks fruits and vegetables into delaying their ripening by up to an entire year. Sounds like a wonderful thing to have there, but it's not safe. It's another chemical that is there to improve profitability, and it causes all kinds of problems. Now, let's see. Little bit of good news from space program. And we're coming up on a commercial break, so I'm going to save this for our last segment here. And we'll be back here after these commercials, so please stay tuned. And we'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And before I get into the science news here, story that just came across my desk here. A federal judge has ordered a private review of tightly guarded documents related to an unsolved murder of 2 boys covered up by local Arkansas authorities 30 years ago. And then Governor Bill Clinton was accused of being involved with the deaths after he reportedly made a deal with the medical examiner who was accused of destroying key evidence related to the case. Now, the kids were Kevin Ives and Don Henry, and they were basically run over by a train. And it was originally declared, they were smoking marijuana, they fell asleep on the tracks. But the engineer of the locomotive said they'd been covered by a tarp. He didn't see them until he was just on top of them. And the rumors were that these boys had witnessed a drug operation allegedly tied to Clinton and the CIA. It became known as the train deaths. And the mother of one of the boys, Linda Ives, has never let up on the case. And apparently they're going to have another look at that, because there are a lot of dead bodies around the Clintons. Okay, the rover Opportunity has survived the Martian winter. These 2 rovers have just been amazing. And it's passed the 5,000 soul mark on Mars, approaching the 15th anniversary of its launch. And thankfully without the desolate rendition of Happy Birthday played by Curiosity. But while it survived the Martian winter, it may not survive NASA's budget cuts. And hidden within NASA's fiscal year 2019 budget, between the proposal to crash the International Space Station in 2025 and the gutting of much of NASA's Earth science and education outreach efforts, that's tied into global warming, we won't miss that, is another attempt to kill off the long-lived Mars rover. Now, the previous cuts were reversed by Congress, but this time the one-armed rock-gathering rover may not be so lucky. Now, back when I worked for NASA, the attitude was that as long as that spaceship was working, you keep the mission going because you're gaining more science from that. But now to spend all the money putting that up there and, it's lasted way too long, we just want to shut it off. Tell you what you ought to do. Normal procedure for terminating a spacecraft is you send the instruction to shut off the command receiver so it can no longer receive any orders. And that's to keep it from inadvertently transmitting and interfering with other satellites that are going to be launched in the future. I think if NASA can't manage rover any longer, they should find some university that has access to the necessary radio telescopes to basically take it on over and teach these kids about Mars, teach them how to run a spaceship. It's a shame to let it go to waste here. Last little story here. Apparently at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, they were displaying one of the terracotta warriors from China. And an American went on in, took a selfie with it, and then decided he was going to take the thumb as a souvenir. But they caught him at it. That's a terrible thing to do to an antiquity. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stanley's program. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to tell you. Please take what you learn here and share it with everybody that you know, especially related to the FISA warrants and all this other propaganda nonsense that is just being showered all over us. We are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.